ancient biblical prophets wrote about the future. Today, theologians are poring over those scriptures with a firm belief that their prophecies are coming to pass. Journey now into the world of eschatology on Prophecy in the News with author and lecturer J.R. Church.
On today's Prophecy in the News, we're going to look at Revelation chapter 18, the destruction of Mystery Babylon. I guess we could call it Babylon is fallen, is fallen. Gary Stearman is here to discuss with me the destruction of the final world system.
Thanks, J.R. And we come today to Revelation chapter 18, if you want to follow along in your own Bible. Revelation chapter 18 talks about the destruction of Mystery Babylon the Great, truly one of the historical hallmarks that will occur in a future time. I'm going to read the first two verses of this chapter. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Well, this is where we're going to start our discussion today. J.R.?
And first of all, let's talk about the another angel that comes down, because the earth is lightened with his glory. Now, this type of terminology is only used of deity. In the Old Testament, for example, in Psalm 72, it says, let the whole earth be filled with his glory. In Isaiah 6:3, it says, let the whole earth be filled with his glory. In Ezekiel 43:2, it says, and the earth shined with his glory. You can see that this seems to be indicative of the Lord Jesus Christ. This another angel, some say, might be the same another angel that took the coals from the altar in heaven in chapter 8. This another angel that comes down with the scroll open and stands with 1 foot upon the sea and 1 foot upon the land in chapter 10. This same another angel that appears on the white cloud with a sickle in his hand in chapter 14 that we see in his final appearance in chapter 19 when John says, I see heaven open, behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness doth he judge and make war. Gary, it appears that all of these are typical of the final second coming of Jesus Christ and his glory and his judgment upon the earth.
Absolutely. And at this time, we are on the precipice of a great, to use a very popular term nowadays, regime change. We're going to change from an old regime, namely the regime of Mystery Babylon the Great, to the new regime. In fact, it'll be the beautiful kingdom under the Lord Jesus Christ, seated upon the throne of David. This is going to be a dark time. The sun has been darkened. There have been cataclysms, nothing like the one that's just about to fall. But, J.R., the earth is going to be a very dark, miserable place. And this angel is said to lighten the earth with his glory. That's an interesting thought.
You know, the sun being darkened and no longer shines, and the moon is not shining, the earth will be filled with darkness, and in the sky above, in all of that inky blackness, suddenly there appears a light of exquisite beauty. It is the Lord of glory, and his glory is so magnificent that the whole earth shines with his glory. I think that's what it's referring to here.
Now, there's a phrase here, which we read a moment ago, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. Here we have is fallen twice. And that has been the subject of much discussion over the years. What does it mean to repeat that phrase?
Well, you know, speaking of the question itself, what is this two fallings? Isaiah also refers to this, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. So this appears to be a quote from Isaiah here. Is it two fallings of Babylon? Well, let's go back to the first and ask the question, is this the first one, the fall of Nimrod's Babylon? Because there God came down, confused the language, the tribes of the earth scattered all over the earth, could not understand one another's speech. They left off to build a city and the tower. Is that the first falling? Well, Gary, you know, Nimrod stayed around for a while. Even though he lost his kingdom as such, he still maintained his kingdom over Shinar.
That's right.
In fact, in the days of Abraham, we're told that Amraphel, the king of Shinar, got together with Kedorlaomer and Tidal and These four kings, you know, who represent the great world empires, came against Sodom and Gomorrah. And this is typical of the final destruction of the city. In fact, the Lord says that his destruction of Babylon here will be like Sodom and Gomorrah. So we can go back and look at those four kings, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And then, of course, Abraham went and destroyed them with only 318 soldiers.
That's right.
And so this is a miniature Battle of Armageddon back in the pages of Genesis. So actually Nimrod didn't fall back then. Now his kingdom sort of fell apart, but it's scattered all over the earth. Men went everywhere preaching this idolatrous religion of mystery, Babylon, the goddess worship, Ishtar and Baal worship.
Well, then the next great Babylonian ruler, if you will, after Nimrod was Nebuchadnezzar, and he's called by Daniel in the prophecy of Daniel the head of gold. Was his fall the first fall of Babylon?
Well, you know, we know that Babylon fell of sorts, but when the Medes and Persians came in, they did not destroy the city. And the Bible indicates here that this final fall of Mystery Babylon will be so catastrophic that the city will be in ashes and ruins from now on. So Babylon wasn't really destroyed at that time. The Medes and the Persians simply changed the political structure. In fact, Isaiah talked about Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, and he says, "O thou daughter of Babylon." So Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was not the mother, it was the daughter. And I think we see this daughter. There are more destructions too. Not only was the destruction of Babylon in Isaiah 13 and 14 a picture of the future destruction, but is called here the daughter. Ezekiel also has a destruction of a mystery Babylon of sorts. But, you know, with all these different fallings, we can't say there are only two.
That's right. So the phrase "is fallen is indeed cryptic, difficult to understand. In a way, J.R., you could say that Babylon still exists today. That is, Daniel's prophecy of the head of gold going down to the feet, the 10 toes, really is one long extended time period for Babylon. The mother then would be something like a metaphysical truth that's behind the whole system. I think of Zechariah's prophecy where he has the woman in the ephah going over and being set upon her base in Shinar.
Yes.
She is not a visible woman as such, she's a spiritual entity.
So a few programs back when we talked about the global village, being connected through the internet and satellites and the whizzes and the whirs of the economic system moving back and forth, this is an ethereal thing, something that is not concrete. There is a concrete system of the daughter of Babylon, but the mother is more along the lines of a metaphysical entity.
The power, sort of the power behind the throne, if you will.
So when you look at any particular city in the world, let's take, for example, Rome. We're not looking at the mother. We're looking at the daughter. When we talk about Europe, with Europa and the European Parliament being built like the Tower of Babel, we're talking daughter here. We're not talking mother. When we talk about New York City or America being Mystery Babylon, we're not talking about the mother here. We're talking about daughters, because this is the mother of harlots, and all those harlots are her daughters. And it is a great city. The word in the Greek is megalopolis. That's several cities. So when we say Babylon is fallen, what we're saying here is the first falling is the metaphysical system of goddess worship, the Luciferian religion. And the second falling here is all of the cities of the earth. All her daughters.
All the daughters. Everything that was kept alive by the infrastructure. In verse 3 it says, "For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies." Verse 4 says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins." And we have here a very interesting juncture, I think.
we have the decree of God for all the Jewish people, the chosen people, to leave the cities. I think this is the great cities, that is, all of the capitals of the world. And if you'll notice, for example, down in verse 9, it says, the kings of the earth who have committed fornication with her shall bewail her and lament for her. But these kings of the earth are associated with her, the cities.
Yes.
But the 10 kings over here are associated with the beast, not with her. And that's important for us to understand. There's a difference here between the 10 kings and the kings of the earth. Mm-hmm. We want to explain that difference when we return in just a moment. All of the cities of the earth, that is the great capitals of the earth, are involved in the daughtership, shall we say, of Mystery Babylon. And so when we look at the capitals, for example, Moscow versus Washington, D.C., we're looking at two daughters of Babylon. That's the way I see it. So I think that when those three frog-like demons go out from the New World Order and began to deceive the kings of the earth and draw them into the great battle, I think this is a political insanity here, a paranoid group of politicians, mm-hmm. the separate nations against the United Nations.
So really we have the battle here of the 10 kings versus the kings of the earth.
Right.
And the kings of the earth are mentioned in Revelation 18:3. We have already talked about them. The 10 kings, literally the kings associated with the beast, are in league with Mystery Babylon the Great for a while, and then they break away.
Yes. So the mystery refers back to the original Semiramis, Nimrod, Tower of Babel back in the ancient mm-hmm. past. The word great here refers to all of the daughters, the various capitals and cities of the world. Now, it says she's going to be destroyed in 1 hour, Gary, and to me this sounds like a nuclear exchange. Mm. So let's just draw a brief scenario here. Let's say that the President of the United States in Washington, D.C. decides that he doesn't like this New World Order, that the Antichrist and his 10 cohorts that have divided up the world into 10 regional economic regions. He no longer wants to be associated with that. And there's a friction there. And a paranoid ruler over in Moscow, he is, being talked to by this demonic-like entity of the New World Order, and we got to get them straightened up, and over here we got to get them straightened up, and suddenly somebody pushes the button. Here comes the nuclear exchange. And of course, once we see that the bombs have been launched against us, we launch the bombs against them. Mm-hmm. And Europe launches bombs, and all of the various nations that are nuclear powers, they launch it against each. In other words, everybody's going to be destroyed in 1 hour, all the cities.
Now, J.R., this has led to a lot of confusion in the past because usually they say, well, that great city, Revelation 18:10, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And they say, well, the great city is one particular city. And many different particular cities have been named, New York and Rome or London. Yes. But we hold that the great city is really the infrastructure, that humming system, that 24-hour global merchant banking system, that control system. In the days of the Antichrist, it will be a human control system that supports the mark. It'll be global television, it'll be the internet, it'll be the scientific grid that hums 24 hours a day, and then suddenly, when the nuclear exchange happens, everything comes to a screeching halt. The grid is down, the satellites are up there, but JR, nobody's talking to them. The transmitters are all dead.
When all the cities, now I don't know that Oklahoma City is going to be one, or Dallas, but I suspect the possibility that the major metropolitan cities in the United States will be taken out along with the major metropolitan areas. Maybe not the small communities, but the major cities. In 1950, there was only one city in the whole world with over 10 million population. That was New York City. In the next 10 years, there will be 75 cities in this world with over 10 million population. Mexico City, for example, has 25 million population. It would probably be one of those nuked. If all of the major cities were nuked, it would destroy the commerce of the whole world. And so we have here, Gary, the kings of the earth lamenting, the merchants of the earth in verse 11 lamenting, and then we have the ship masters lamenting as well. That would be in verse 17. So we have these three groups. The kings have no kingdom. The merchants have no customers. And the ship masters have no ports.
And all of this was prophesied. For example, back in Ezekiel 26, 27, and 28, we have a prophecy against Tyre. Well, Tyre was the Phoenician traders of the ancient world that set up the whole international sea trade that still exists to this day. And they're called the ships of Tarshish by Ezekiel. And J.R., listen to this. Those ships of Tarshish are going to come to a screeching halt. Ezekiel 26:30 says, the Lord shall cause their voice to be heard against thee, and shall cry bitterly, and shall cast dust upon their heads, and they shall wallow themselves in the ashes. And their ships, quote, shall fall into the midst of the seas in the day of thy ruin. So even Ezekiel talks about this event, the international merchant trade being the object of the destruction.
Now, why would all these nations be so paranoid as to launch a mutually assured destruction against each other? Well, remember the 7 vials of wrath. Everybody's got this disease. And then suddenly all of the rivers and the oceans are polluted, destroying the food chain of the oceans. And then the sun explodes and burns up all of the croplands and all of that food chain. In other words, there's no food left in the grocery stores. All this happens quickly or everybody would starve to death. And then the sun goes out and there's blackness all over the world. And while the sun was so hot, it was boiling up the atmosphere, creating great storms until there are superstorms, hailstones weighing up to 100 pounds, destroying every building. The whole earth is going to look like a plowed field when it's all over with. And then these frogs come out, frog-like demons out of the Euphrates, and begin to go throughout the earth and bring everybody to the Battle of Armageddon. It's World War III, when everybody is going to think it's the Jews' fault. Let's go kill the Jews.
And it'll cause hatred. Unregenerate men will grow in their fierce rage, finally against God himself. But don't forget the geophysical upheaval, J.R. There will be not only darkenings of the sun, massive meteorological changes that you mentioned, but also islands will sink in the sea. The continents are going to be transformed. The tilt of the earth will be changed.
Isaiah says the earth will be removed out of her place.
Yeah.
In other words, the orbit of the earth will also be altered.
Absolutely.
Because of the explosion of the sun and the collapse of the sun, I guess.
Unbelievable.
And so what we've got here is total disaster and catastrophe upon the planet, and it is all a judgment of God. We find out in verse 20, he says, rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. So all of this destruction of man against man, paranoid against paranoid, it's all because they don't acknowledge God. Without God, they have no anchor, no place to lock onto.
You know, in Revelation 18, there's this long list of fine delicacies that are traded in this system. And I don't have time to read them all. You can read them yourself down through verse 11, 12, 13, 14. And things like cinnamon and odors, ointments, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves, and the souls of men. You know, you can sell your soul to the marketplace, and that's the sin. I think that is the deep sin of Mystery Babylon. The souls of men are captured by this system.
Right. You got to understand that the city as an entity was the first idolatry under Nimrod. Well, let's talk about John 18 for a moment, because we compare that. In John 18, Judas Iscariot betrayed the king and his kingdom. And in Revelation 18, Judas Iscariot's kingdom, Mystery Babylon, is judged and destroyed.
Wow.
So it's the conflict of the kingdoms of these chapters. Now let's talk about the Hebrew tzaddik for a moment.
Yeah.
That 18th letter. It stands for righteousness and the righteous people. And I just read in verse 20, God says, all you righteous, I've avenged you on her.
Yeah, in fact, the 18th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, representing Revelation 18, that letter tzaddik is the letter of righteousness. And here we have the death of wickedness and the reestablishment of righteousness. Perfectly suitable here.
Right, because the last verse, 24, says, and in her was found the blood of the prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. There it is, the destruction of Mystery Babylon. We'll be back in just a moment.
I'd like to talk to you for a moment about an exciting new offer from Prophecy in the News, and that offer is the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary. Beautifully bound, beautifully produced, top-notch scholarship, and every page of these 4 volumes covering Matthew to Revelation is in full 4-color process. You're going to find an amazing array of maps, charts, artists' conceptions, sidebars, easy to read study aids, and as I said, the scholarship, well, Clinton Arnold, the general editor, Talbot School of Theology, you're going to find the Bible interpretation right on the mark. Now, this is different from anything Zondervan has done before. Well, let's look, for example, at Volume 1, page 172. Now, this is the Matthew study, and you'll find in here the story of the crucifixion of Christ at this point. But you'll also find a picture of the potter's field, Akeldama. You'll also find a sidebar about Barabbas and the thieves who were crucified with Christ, talking about the cultural ferment of the day, the fact that those thieves were really revolutionaries. You're also going to find a sidebar about the life of Pontius Pilate, including, by the way, the famous Pontius Pilate inscription, photograph of that. In short, you're going to receive a broad background, all the subjects that impinge upon the crucifixion of Christ. That's what's meant by Bible Backgrounds Commentary. Now, normally the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary retails for $159.95. At Prophecy in the News, we're going to make it available to you for only $134.95, and as an added inducement to ordering right now, we're going to include a free bonus, and that is the 3 VHS videotape set right in front of me. It's called Deciphering Daniel. Contains 12 studies, one for each of the 12 chapters of Daniel. It's an exciting study, and JR and I go into depth in these 3 VHS videotapes. Normally $49.95, yours absolutely free. Plus, we're going to also give you a free subscription, 1-year subscription to Prophecy in the News, our monthly magazine, and that would be valued at $29.95 altogether. This would be a $240 value, yours for only the price of the Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary, and that's $134.95. This Zondervan publication is brand new. It's something very, very timely. Order today. Call the number on your screen right now.
Mystery Babylon. It's been a fascinating study, Gary. Let me just mention to you that we've got a magazine called Prophecy in the News. If you'd like to get this month's edition, you can do so by calling the 800 number at the bottom of your screen and asking for a sample copy of Prophecy in the News.
And by the way, JR's Revelation studies, month by month, are included right in Prophecy in the News, the magazine. You can read them in all their detail.
And before we go, I want to mention again the book, In Their Own Words, The Personal Testimonies of Men and Women of Faith. I'm in Chapter 5. We'd like for you to have it. It's $12.95 plus shipping and handling, and your gift will help us to maintain our television ministry. I hope you will write and get it, In Their Own Words. Call the phone number at the bottom of your screen. If you don't know Christ as your Savior, trust Him today. He can give you eternal life. This is J.R. Church and Gary Stearman. Until next time, keep looking up.
Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported ministry sponsored by our many friends across America and in your area. For your gift of $10, you can receive a special edition of our current program on audio tape, or for a gift of $20, we'll send you our programs on videotape. For either order, call the 800 number on your screen right now.